This is my first time in Atlanta, so I'm very excited to be here with you. Also, for me, it's kind of the first lecture after I had a baby. I have a very little baby. So you're starting the semester, I'm also starting with the same energy, so I'm glad to have this coincidence. I'm going to talk a little bit of how the work in the office has evolved, on how and why we are doing what we're doing now. I always like to start comparing my work or the moment where I wanted to present something with art, because as Jude mentioned, I'm very linked to it and I appreciate a lot of it, and it makes me think a lot on many things. Especially tonight I thought of starting with this film by Fischli and Weiss. There are a couple of Swiss artists that David Weiss passed away last year, so it coincided with the idea of thinking on my work. This film, its name, or this video is named The Way Things Go, and it seems that it's a series of coincidences that it's a chain that create a chain of events that could seem randomly work together to create the next step, but actually is a perfectly maneuvered and orchestrated chain of events that lead one to the other one. In the case of one of my work, it's not a perfectly orchestrated because one cannot control that, but it's been a chain of reactions like these things are, in a way that it had led us, I think, to a very simple but profound way of doing, or at least we think is profound for us, of doing and thinking about architecture and what for. I also like to see this film in the way of the collaborations of things to create one single story. You know, in my case, I believe that architecture nowadays needs to be done by many minds. I don't believe right now that architecture could be only done like in the past by one single solo mind and having their designers under them. I think that it needs a horizontal collaboration, not only with architects, with other professions as well. I think it's truly important that architecture now can really be a response and not a solution, because I don't believe that architecture as a solution, but as a really good starting point to enhance life in this moment, in this precise moment of society, where we are a very complex society with a lot of new complexities, globalization, consumerism, capitalism as it most. So I think architecture can provide really a way of lifting life in this precise moment of history. In every other as well, but I think that now is very, very important. So I don't think that doing it from a sole mind could really work, as understanding the place where you work, the society that you will deliver the project with. It's not an easy job, so it's not easy to do it with one single mind. I think you need several minds, and not only several architects. I think you really need people from different backgrounds, different academic backgrounds, but also different cultural and ethnic backgrounds. So this is why I believe collaborating within my office, in my office, and I'm going to speak in plural the whole lecture because we are a team. Of course, I'm probably the face of and the leader of the team, but we are a team and we work together horizontally. But also, I always like to collaborate with different co-professionals, different professions as well, and you will see also that through my lecture. So when I was thinking on David Weiss when he passed away, and I was remembering one of their most important works, which was that one, The Way Things Go. I truly thought on how in my work the way things go have affected or have really affected how what I'm doing today. No, I live in Mexico City, and the office is there. I grew up there. Mexico City is the red dot in the country. Mexico City is a 22 million city. It is probably as extensive as Atlanta, not even counting the suburbs. So you can imagine how dense it is. But although you could think that it looks pretty dense. It's a city that when you're there, the scale is so easy to maneuver with that you don't feel like probably New York, which is totally dense, and you feel you have the 9 million people that live there on top of your head, because you literally have them. In Mexico, you don't. In Mexico, it's a very extended city. It's an average 2-floor height. It has definitely some corridors or streets that have taller buildings, but not so many. It is a very green city, although you wouldn't imagine that of a 22 million city, but it is. It was during the 40s that there was an urban policy. I think that when the only urban policies were working in the city, that they had to plant a tree every 20 meters, and it really every 20 meters on a sidewalk, and it really worked because nowadays the city is pretty green. There are many informal settlements that have become formal, and this is one of our big interests, how organically this city has developed. This looks totally rigidly planned, but it wasn't. The thing and why it's so straight is because the agricultural land that this illegal part of the city was built on was divided like this, and this was the owners were having these plots that are so rigidly disposed, and this is why the grid looks so planned, but it was never planned. This is an informal settlement. That what happened, it was that the people arrived, then they started to create in their own community, even their own services. Then the government arrived. Then the government had to rebuy the illegal land to put some infrastructure and to start really putting services, legal services, established services for the communities there. It has grown also organically all over the valley, all the way up till the valley ends, and doesn't allow anymore to grow, literally, as you can see here. The historic center is one of a kind. It's really important, and it was founded by the Aztecs before the Spaniards arrived, and when the Spaniards arrived, they built on top, literally, of the Aztec city. So it's very representative of our culture. It also has this very mixed of architecture. I think this works, yeah. So this is a historic center. As you can see, there's a lot of different styles in the architecture because there's many different times of the history where the investment has been done. We also have these neighborhoods of the boom of the real estate development, which they look like they could be anywhere in the world. We have people that have been building on top of the hills, very rich people that would like to have their gardens flat, so therefore they build a huge structure to have a flat house and a flat garden in a hill, but also people that are much poorer and they need to really stick to the topography. No, we have a huge housing problem, of course, because the city is the city of opportunity. So every other person in the country wants to come and live in Mexico City, which the government is solving like this. But definitely, I think that it goes nowhere. It's getting nowhere. Now it's getting into really a line where it's even a breakdown for all the companies and for all the people, because this is not a solution, definitely. But as I was saying, it's a very extended city. It's a beautiful city, and we have our office in the center of the city. For me, it's very important that we are exactly where all the energy gets together, which is, for me, it's here. It's in the Ángel de la Independencia, it's called this monument, and our office is right here. for me, it's very important that we have this opportunity of really having the energy of the city inside our office. This is literally what happens. We are facing Reforma in this place, so you can see we are all day long in communication with this exterior space, and everything happens in Reforma in this area, like all the demonstration, manifestations, when we win a football championship that we do. We won the Olympics, so at least, and political demonstrations. A lot of things happen around these monuments. So for me, it was very important to be there. We started doing architecture the way we learn to do architecture. So I learned architecture in the moment where in every other school in the world we were starting to try to create architecture with uncharted geometries, with very technological material, with different softwares, and creating architecture through algorithms. And although I was never given the right tools to it, we were taught to do architecture like that. So when I started doing architecture, this is what definitely I was looking for: uncharted geometries, how to do these spaces, amazing structures that could hold with different very technological materials. But when I started working, I realized that it was probably hard to use these technological materials that I didn't know, because I wasn't taught to use them, and that we don't have them by hand. So, but we still did some buildings, and strangely, well, we did this building in China, which is a pavilion an exhibition pavilion in China, in a park where other 17 structures are. We did this artist studio in Mexico City. And strangely enough, with this one, in the project in China, of course not because of the distance between us and the construction site, but with this one we learned a lot about the construction technique. In China was a little bit the same as happened in Mexico. And we truly learned how to do exposed concrete with this building. We were experimenting with forms, and that add a complexity to the building, but at least at the end, what we truly understood was how to treat exposed concrete. This is white exposed concrete. I'm sorry it doesn't look very well, but and there we continue working, and we continue developing different projects with trying to understanding how to break these geometries and how to combine these geometries with the materials we could use. We designed this house in Monterrey, in a hill, which was recently completed, but it was designed at that time. That what its principles was that we started with an hexagon, and the hexagon was starting to break depending on the topography, the program, and the different site conditions like trees, rocks, etc. And so we were trying to explore, as I was saying, different geometries, not probably experimenting a lot with materials because we couldn't have them by hand. But I think that truly a breaking point was building this house. This house is a house that was designed by artist Gabriel Orozco. Gabriel Orozco is one of the most renowned contemporary artists in Mexico. His work is international recognition, and he's been exhibiting in all the museums in the world, etc. He's the one that I can say that is the limit from postmodern art to contemporary art in Mexico, and he's the one that created the School of Contemporary Art in Mexico. So he's a very influential person. He's a key person. A funny story how I met him when I was out of school, and this is kind of also like a message. When I was out of school, of course, we had nothing to do, no commissions. We had a lot of things to do, but no direct commissions. We We were doing many competition, any other competition that was out open in the world, we were doing it. But also we were thinking on doing exercises to develop our minds. We were designing a house in the moon, for example, because probably we thought we were going to start designing houses for the moon at this time, but well, maybe no, soon. And we were thinking on houses in different projects and public projects, etc., doing different exercises. And we loved the work of Gabriel Orozco. It was very little known in Mexico still at that time, but we knew his work. So we decided to study a little bit more on him and his work, not knowing him. And we designed a house for him, and we knocked on his door, literally like that, not knowing him, and saying we design a project for you. And he was very happy to hear about it, our crazy idea. And he followed a little bit the project. That was an utopic project, nothing happened. And 5 years later, he arrives knocking in my door, asking me for help for his project. So that's a little story that you never know what leads you when you knock a door. And then, so this, when he came, he had the design, and he wanted me to help him only to build it. So for me, it was kind of a strange commission, but also was very interesting to work along with him on this project in a beautiful site. And so what we did is we adapted his idea, which was to build the same structure as a Jantar Mantar in India, which is an observatory in India that exists in the 1795, and transform it into a house and build it in this place. So what we did is we did this architectural process of translating this idea into a built thing. That process gave us a lot of things. Obviously, as I was saying, being near Gabriel Orozco for 3 years was amazing. But I think the most important thing that this project left us was that what we had to do, our task was to be able to build this in this place with the local people of the fishing village and build this structure, which to us appeared in the beginning as a very simple structure, a very simple task. But you can imagine that being so remote and finding people that would never ever have used concrete in their lives was a pretty difficult task. But that gave us a lot of key issues to our understanding of architecture. I think that first of all, what we understood is we don't have the labor skills that technological materials require. We don't have the technological materials that the new architecture required, that the architecture created with algorithms in a computer software required. We don't have probably not even the language that is able to be transmitted to these people for that architecture. But we do have a highly creative hand labor, highly flexible, amazingly cheap, unfortunately, because that's bad for the country, obviously. But that makes things different. It's just different. We don't know if it's better or good, but that's the conditions that we have in Mexico. The conditions that really are imposing, for me it's not imposing, actually for me it's the conditions that are permitting to create this type of architecture, no? So I understood at that moment that it was really strange to keep thinking on designing uncharted geometries, looking for different algorithms to create an incredible skin that could cover a space, blah, 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 with a thermic material, high tech that we don't have. That's it. No, we don't know it. We don't have it. We don't build it. The people don't know how to use it, how to install it, how to use it, how to maintain it. So I thought that if we were struggling to build this very simple geometric structure, as we struggled to build it, and we created at the end a beautiful structure that really worked finally, why would we struggle trying to do uncharted geometries? To explain to these people to do the semi-sphere mold for the pool was already a very complex task. No wonder if we, on top of it, had totally folded surface with totally different angles. I don't know how could we have explained it to them. I mean, it would have been impossible. So this is the kind of reflections that this work gave us to the office and led us to develop the architecture that we are now doing. So what we're trying to do is, probably we always start with a very defined geometric form, and it goes more complex every time we go more into the project, or we think on it, or we add all the complexities that are needed by the program or the context or whatever. And for example, like this one, that we started with the most archetypical form of a house, we started adding the complexity, combining it with the program, the complexities of the site, and at the end the result is a house with the archetypical form, but including a lot more of the complexities that they are our way of thinking that this translation of this project would need it. This is, for example, another example. This is a spectacle center for a very special spectacle done in Mexico, that it's done in a Roman-like theater, which has a circle in the center and then all the people is surrounded. It's a spectacle named Palenque. And so it's when singers are very aware of what the public is saying, and the public gets messed with the singers, etc. So so what we created is a structure. This is off battery. A structure that folds around the scenario, that is obviously in references to the Guggenheim in New York. But what the idea is, like, we wanted to activate the interior rings for circulation, but also for program, as well as the exterior ones. We wanted to create this series of rings that could help us to do a building also that could serve for different things, not only when the building was used to have this spectacle, but also when the building is not used to have this spectacle. Also, something that we are very involved in is very interested in how we can activate buildings in a different way, and not just what the client asks us, no? In this case, the client asks us literally for a palenque, for this spectacle center, and we thought, why don't we use the restaurants serving for the palenque when the palenque is going on, to serve as public restaurants as well? Why don't we use the bar also to create a nice bar that could be used for both ways? Why don't we use the whole building to be a viewing platform instead of just being a spectacle center? And this is why we created these rings that could hold that. So also, kind of our involvement goes through there, convincing the clients that in our economy also we need to push things further. I don't even think that only in our economy. I think everywhere in the world we should push things forward and not create buildings that could really work for more things, no? Especially, I think that's our responsibility nowadays. This building, same principle. They asked us for an office building that would be very flexible, that had flexible floor plans. They said that they had studied before that the best floor plans for them, they work, or the best spaces are square rooms or rectangular rooms at the most, very simple, free of walls and partitions. but very easy to connect with, and with a single element of circulation. So what we did is we took their needs, and we said, okay, we do these rectangle floors, and we create a stacking of this building, of these floors, that we moved depending on the program, but also on the shadow that could allow us to really take care of this building as a very sustainable building, not in terms of adding technology to make it sustainable, just in terms of using the correct light and orientation and ventilation. And with the movements of the stacking of the floors, we could achieve the kind of shadows that we needed in each floor at each time of the day, depending on the program that it was inside. This is something that I also think it's a big necessity nowadays. No, we need to understand that architecture, we're going with more technology and asking for more new requirements to make it more sustainable. Why don't we go back and use our more natural and simple tools we have to create buildings that are more efficient? So that's what we don't do the other way, because we cannot do the other way, because our economy cannot hold the other way, our technology cannot hold the other way. So we start on that. But that, I think, it should be what we go back to at the end. No. This house had another important issue. We needed to build a house of 300 square meters, which is not so big, with a budget of 120,000 more or less US dollars, which in the US sounds like crazy. You cannot build a house that big. 3,000 square meters, I think, 300 square meters, like 3,000 square feet, more or less. In Mexico, you can build it. It's a good budget, but not with these spaces that the client wanted. Well, it's not a good budget. It's a tight budget, but it's feasible. But the client wanted really like a living room with double height and wood inside, and a studio, and 4 rooms, and service area, etc., etc. So with all these requirements, it was the budget was really, really tight. So our first idea was to think on what material we could use to meet this budget. I also think, and you have seen it through what I've shown, that architecture is a language. And for me, the best way to start a conversation and to set up the basis for a conversation is to be very direct. And fortunately for us in Mexico, with the weather and the conditions there we have, we can use the materials in a very direct way. This doesn't happen in other types of weather. Unfortunately, it's not so easy though. It can, but it's not so easy. So as you can see, we like to use the material in its all expressions. We like it to be the aesthetic definition, the acoustic solution, the thermal solution, the structural definition, etc. So everything done with the same material. So for this house, we needed one material that could allow us to do all that and be within the budget. So concrete was out of the question. Brick, we needed a double structure, because if we wanted we needed the wall, the brick, and another structure, a substructure to get the height. Wood is not an option in Mexico. We cannot build with wood. It's totally expensive. We don't have wood to build. Still out of the question because of budget. So what we arrived to is that we could use compacted earth. So I started studying the compacted earth. We haven't used it before, and we arrived to the conclusion that this was the correct material. It was a very noble material that allowed us to build the house that we wanted within the budget that was given to us. And the thing is that the walls are very thick. They're 2 foot, probably 60 centimeters thick. So that makes the structure feasible for the spans we wanted. And so this is only compacted earth all over. It's just earth, and you compact it with a machine, and earth with water, with 8% of cement. And we used concrete slabs because this was the cheapest in terms of the structure solution and in terms of the idea that we had for the house. So what we did in this one, the way of starting to develop the project was to study the material, to understand the material, understand how we could build it, and then we developed the project and the house and the idea of the house. Which is very simple. It's just two squares that hold one the public program, the other one the more private program of the house, and one is facing the mountain, this one, and the other one, as you saw in the beginning, is facing the lake. So this one is totally more open to the lake, the other one is more close to the mountain. Also is north and south. There's a big lake here. And this is a second home for the family, and obviously you can see they're very. It's very simple and the interiors because of the budget as well. These two still columns you see there, they're not columns, they're tubes. They're the tubes that hold the drainage from the rooftops, and part of the ornamentation of the interior of the house, the aesthetic of the house, what we decided. And in the same way, we did this funeral house in San Luis Potosí. The program is divided into 6 chapels. We call them mooring chapels, the chapels where the body is when you go and do the funeral ritual. They're overposed within a patio that it's covered, a covered patio that leads to all the funeral chapels. And here our main idea was how to get in a space that could really enhance or exalt your feelings when you are there, and you can leave all your feelings there and then go a little bit more relaxed. Because of the situation that is given when you go to this space. But besides, I could really speak truly on this project for 2 hours. Besides all the spirituality that goes behind and all the conceptual ideas that go behind this project and the process we did with the light, etc., transitional spaces, limits, etc., because of the subject. More practically speaking, what we wanted is to use a local material. It looks very pink. It's not so pink, but it's pink. What we did is obviously the only material that we could use that could allow us to do these organic forms and structure was concrete, and we used the aggregate of the earth of the area, which is pink. This is why it's pink. It's pinkish. This looks pinker than in real, but. For example, in this one, we knew we were going to get the hand labor that was a very, very untrained hand labor, like even the worst hand labor, trained hand labor we could get, even worse than in Roca Blanca, because these people would never ever before in their lives had built nothing. So this we knew because the client told us in the beginning that he was going to build it with this guy that helped them before to do the plumbing, even washing the cars, So this guy was going to be the head of the construction. This we knew. So we decided, why don't we design with him? Understanding what we could take him to do. So we started with him doing all the tests of the concrete. It took us like over a year. The clients had this patience and this money to do it. It was not so expensive, but the time was big. And so we developed also the mold for the walls with them. The pouring, we poured a part of a wall probably 20 times to understand how we could do it with the correct amount of this aggregate for the color, etc. At the end, we had to put a little pigment because it was not working. So as you can see, the color is not perfectly developed in the whole thing, but this is also something that we knew it was going to happen. And in this case, what I think that this project allows us to understand, and why I'm showing it now, is because although it's not perfect, and we thought it was not going to be perfect because we knew it since the beginning that this person was not going to achieve a perfect exposed concrete, we wanted to create something and to understand how we could define the space, not depending on the little details and not depending on the perfect finish of the building, but depending on the design of the space, that the space could really be the strong thing there, and that if it was not perfectly finished, as it is, you can see, then it didn't matter. So because the space is really what matters, no? So I think this is also something very important on the work we do, because it's impossible to achieve. If we would have think that we always wanted to achieve this perfectly Swissly, nicely perfect concrete like in Switzerland, then we would be frustrated the whole time, because this is impossible to achieve here. So I think that this is important to say, that we are also aware that our designs are not going to be perfectly finished, and so therefore we get the advantages of that, and we use them in our site. These two projects that I'm going to present quickly to the end, I wanted to focus a little bit, but I think I'm getting very long, are two, I think, two of my most loved projects. I like them very much. They're in my heart, I think, because many reasons. The two are public projects. The first one is a botanical garden in Culiacan. Mexico City is the red dot in the center. You saw it before. This is the state of Sinaloa, and the capital is Culiacan, which you might have heard this weekend they captured the biggest capo drug leader in the world, which is El Chapo Guzman. And he is from Culiacan, and he has the largest cartel starting from Culiacan, from this city. So this city has a long history, especially in the minds of everybody, of all of us, of all the Mexicans, to be the drug capital of the country, at least, no? So this is how we know this city. This city has nothing in particular besides for the rivers, which for you might not be so impressive, but in Mexico we have no rivers at all. I mean, we have 3 rivers and they're not navigable, etc. So this city has a particularity that has a river that divides in 3 in the middle of the city, which the people don't use, but this is the only particularity they have. The state is a really productive state. They're the state that exports I think the whole production of tomatoes for Canada or something like that. I'm not sure about these statistics, never ever, so I don't learn them by heart. But the truth is that this state depends in agriculture, and also the economy of the country is very well influenced by this production of agriculture in this state. This is why probably it turned out to become a little bit bad agriculture afterwards, and started the plantation of marijuana, and then the drug cartels become more and more powerful, and then they own like the whole distribution of coke in the world or something, I don't know. Also these statistics, I don't know. I don't care, but the truth is that this state has this characteristic. It is very much influenced in everything, in the architecture, in the way of life, because of this lifestyle of the drug dealers. So not only the drug dealers people, not the drug dealers family, have this lifestyle, but the whole city is becoming like this. This is the cemetery of the drug dealers. It's impressive. It's impressive, and of course it's very big, no? Because everybody, like every week, a lot of people die, very young especially. They also have their own religion, kind of religion. They have their saint, which is Malverde, and this Malverde has influenced really a lot the culture of the city, the music, the fashion, Everything is really permeated by this culture of drug dealers and the new money and rich people, new rich. So it's really influenced, and it's really in the city. And in this city, but there's also a huge economy, of course, of very wealthy established companies, very well legal companies of different things. And there's one of these companies led by Agustin Koppel, who is the president of this botanical board of patrons of this botanical garden. And this botanical garden that existed since 45 years ago. It was created more and more as a botanical garden 25 years ago. And 8 years ago, the president of the board, which is this businessman from this city, decided to donate some pieces of his art collection to the garden, to the public garden. And so therefore he hired a curator, and the curator convinced him that instead of donating pieces of his collection, he has a very important contemporary art collection. Instead of doing that, why wouldn't he commission the artist to do a piece from this artist in the garden? So he was convinced, and they decided they needed an architect to really merge these two programs, to be able to design buildings and things, to merge these two programs, the existing botanical garden and the new program of art. So they invited me, and what I did is we developed a master plan that could really help doing this integration. We developed it tracing the branches of a tree of the existing garden, and with that we overlap it with the existing place. You cannot see these drawings, I'm sorry. So at the end, what we did is we created a master plan that we could insert or integrate the existing garden with the new program, with the different works of art, with the new buildings that needed to be added. This project was done before we did the House of Gabriel. You're going to see clearly why. But you can also see how this program also integrates some large pieces of art. I don't have a pointer, but there are pieces from different artists like Olafur Eliasson, James Turrell, Dan Graham, Lauren Calzadilla. I mean, the list is huge. It's 40 artists working in the site. And we are working also with a team that is developing the ecology of landscape. So we are redoing the whole garden in terms of the ecology of landscape. And our idea is always to be really aware that this garden, first of all, existed, that it was a very fun place for the people in Culiacan. So we didn't want it to change it radically. We just wanted to uplift it and to support what was already happening, but with the vision of the new integration of the new program. So what we did is we really didn't swipe like the activities that happened before. So for example, the yoga that used to happen in the paths, we didn't create a yoga place, because in the beginning, of course, our ambition was, oh, they do yoga, let's do a yoga place, a platform, a blah, blah, with viewing. And then we thought we're going to kill that happening, the spontaneous happening. So we just enhanced the whole place and leave the gardens to be used by the users as it is now. No, our idea was really to intervene the minimum but the toughest as possible at the same time, to really support this integration of the new program. So this is images of the garden that is already intervened, and the pieces of art, for example, like this one, which is a piece from Alora Calzadilla, which are a couple of American artists that very important artists that did this piece. And what I think for my favorite, why is my favorite project is because it has created something in Mexico that it's amazing, and we never thought of it. It's that we are really integrating contemporary art to this society. This society was never in contact with contemporary art, with art, point. let's not say contemporary. There is one museum that is supported by this same guy, obviously, that now every other, and then brings a different exhibition, but it cannot be so ambitious because the space is not very good for it. So art is a rare thing in this society. So when we started putting these pieces, and people are starting to get involved with these pieces in a very quotidian way, in a very everyday everyday life activity, then people is really getting involved with art. Instead of, if these pieces, exactly the same pieces, were put in this exactly museum that I'm telling you about there, nobody would have gone, nobody would have really started interacting with the pieces. No, in this case, okay, it's really funny how they interact, it's really simple. The pavilion of Dan Graham, that obviously is very difficult to photograph, but it is now the scenario for weddings, no? Or this piece of artist Francis Alice, that he crashes Bocho in the garden, and obviously you can imagine what these people are thinking. They're thinking, this strong guy, what is he doing with a car in our garden, no? And then they call it our garden. I mean, it's their garden. So art is really getting involved, not only in the everyday. This is a piece from Olafur Eliasson, which is a beautiful pavilion that shows, that literally makes you think on the path of the seasons, which is in this place is not so obvious, because it seems that it's just only one season, the hell season, because it's so hot that everybody says that it's the hell season. So, but this pavilion allows you to see that there are seasons, actually, because at some points it's really covered with the flowers, some points it's not, and some points it's just the plants that gives different shadows. So through the year you can really see that seasons pass. This is a piece from Richard Long, another American artist. This was the only artist that didn't went to the garden and did a work that was commissioned especially for the garden. This piece was in the Met Plaza in New York. It was installed there. Obviously, it was installed as an art piece, so nothing like this happened in New York. But in here, this piece has been the picnic setting for many things. Also, like they have been filming even fashion passerelles in this on top of the piece, literally. And the thing is that in the garden they are allowing to have these manifestations, because this is the way that really people is getting involved with art. For example, this piece is from a very well known Mexican artist, Teresa Margoles, who is from there, from Culiacan, and she is very involved doing her art very as like protest art on the topic of the drug dealers. And this piece is these very comfortable benches in a beautiful place with lots of shadow, and they're poured in concrete, but the concrete is poured with the water that was used to wash the dead bodies of the people killed by the drug dealers. So in the beginning, there was nobody knew that these benches were done like that, but she always wanted to have an inscription that said that, but for one thing or another, we didn't put it in the beginning, the inscription. We put it very long after the benches were installed. And when they put it, the inscription, there was a huge revolution. Like literally these ladies bring the newspapers, the news in the television. So everybody was focusing on how in the world someone could allow these artists to use this water and not tell them, and allow them to be resting in these benches done with this water, no? I mean, it was really a big topic. And this is what art is about. And this is what is starting to happen, no? The artist says that we are sitting on top of the problem and resting on top of the problem and not doing nothing. And it's literally like this in the garden, no? But the people were really involved with this piece and were really actively trying to take it away, and then the artist came and gave a lecture, and then people started to communicate it, and then starting to like it, etc. So people are getting really involved with art, what art needs to be 4. This is another piece by Marco Rountree, Atelier Van Lieshout, Valesca Suarez. Also the 15 years old take their photographs there because it's very important for them, this place. Julia Nopi, Gabriel Orozco, Sofia Taboas, many different artists. There are 40 artists that are working in the garden. And what we're doing is we're trying to do these little interventions, which, as I told you, were designed way before Gabriel's house, that were, the idea was that they come from the idea of the master plan, and that they, for example, this open air auditorium, that they integrate with nature, and that they always remind you that you are in a botanical garden. No, this, for example, they wanted to create a small auditorium to pass a 7-minute video on what the garden is, and we convinced them to do it in open air. Because if you're going to sit in if you're going to have a 3-hour tour to see this botanical garden in this heat, why wouldn't you be able to see a 7-minute video introduction in the heat as well? No, as you are in there, you went there for that. So we convinced them to do this open little intervention in this open air auditorium like that. So all the structures, the idea is of that. You have some structures that definitely need to be shells that cover space for the program interior. For example, this is an exhibition space, a library, a workshop, or this one, which is the educational facilities, which is a little auditorium, a room for kids, and a service area, bathrooms. But so we separated the program always into the minimum. So if you are in the auditorium and you want to go to the bathroom, you need to exit, and you need to feel the garden, and you need to feel the weather, and you need to hear the sounds of the garden, and then you need to go to wherever you need to. So if an event is happening, a movie is being screened in the auditorium, you are always reminded that you are inside of a botanical garden and not just in the middle of the city, no? Also art at some point is related to architecture. So the bumps you see in front of the buildings, it's a piece by artist named Tercerum Quinto, which is cemetery of the ruins of an existing little hut that used to be the facility for the educational facility for the kids. And so what they did is they buried these ruins, and now it's called New Ruins, and it's like a ludic space for kids as well, related to the kids area. In this case, in terms of architecture, what we did is we created these shells that are self-supported, only with the exterior walls and the roof. So it's like a shell of 30 centimeters thick. So this is why I'm telling you we have the opportunities to build with this weather with these conditions. So we can do these shells like this with alliterated concrete with pellets that are allowing us, one, to be more light, so it can support itself. But secondly, it could really make the space in terms of temperature incredibly efficient, because we can downgrade the outside temperature for 7 or 8 degrees, which when they told me we could do that, I really truly didn't believe so. But it happens. It has been that the interior temperature is sometimes even 10 degrees less than the exterior temperature. So it works with nothing else than the design, with the keeping the sun out and having this shell of this material. And in this case, we were very lucky because the art collector that is founding everything, it's a public space, but it's founded by this private person, which is something also very important that is happening in Mexico, because here in the US, you are used to have these private institutions and private persons to invest in public infrastructure or in public cultural institutions or in research in these things. In Mexico, this doesn't happen. Everybody's waiting for the government to invest on these public spaces or cultural spaces or whatever. But in this case, this is happening, and this is really something that is changing also culturally speaking how things are done. So this is also why it's one of my favorite projects. But he wanted to have have like this beautifully done concrete, and we found this company that is doing this in Mexico, and they really have a very trained hand labor. So this quality of concrete is very special. This is not normal, but we were lucky to have it. We never thought of the building to being built in these perfect conditions, but of course when it's done, it's super nice. So this is what I was telling you. We don't get frustrated because it's not built super nice, because we thought that it needed to be built super nice, but we thought in this case we wanted to create these rough shells that could hold a space interiorly, that could relate with nature, and if they were rough and they were not fairly well finished, it was fine. But then when it happens, then it's really good. Then you're really happy at the end, no? So I think that it's also kind of a technique to not get frustrated in our side, no? This is the interior of when it was just finished. This was like 4 years ago, of the educational room for kids. Now when it's used, the toilets, the auditorium, the vestibule of the auditorium, and the exterior of this set of buildings. Now we're starting the new generation of buildings that we design with the same principles but the new geometries for this project, because this is an ongoing project, and soon I hope I can show you again more of these images. This was a cover we did for Domus, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go very quick to this last project, which is a pilgrimage route that we did along 154 kilometers in the Jalisco state. This is the state of Jalisco. Oops, something is happening. Well, I go further. And this is the route covering a path between a place named Ameca and the Destiny's Talpa, which is there's a church with a Virgin of Rosary, that 3 million pilgrims go there every year during Holy Week, more or less. It's a length of a month, more or less. And the government wanted to, this has happened for 200 years, more or less. And the government wanted to give some infrastructure, because there was no infrastructure at all along the route. And this is why they hire us. And what we wanted is to really think that we could convince them to hire a very wide range of different architects to intervene in this space, because we thought of the topic being really truly important for these people. This is a very spiritual moment. To decide to walk for 4 days to go and pray to a virgin, for me it's an amazing moment of someone. So to do a project to accompany this ritual was very delicate for me in my mind, and I thought I would never be able to do it by myself. So we invited a group of people to develop the master plan, the Mexican architect Derek Delecamp and Rosana Montiel, and along with them we decided to convince the client to hire different architects and artists to intervene in the different parts that they required us to do. We created a master plan. Well, these are images on the little towns that the route passes along that totally depend economically on this route. They sell within this month probably whatever they sell through the year. So this is how important it is for the region, and how little the infrastructure that the pilgrims have. No, they use their houses, the houses of the local people, the public spaces of the little towns. The people there cook for them, for the pilgrims. So these people live truly for this month of the year, no? And the pilgrims also have created different informal infrastructure. This is in the middle of the hills. It's a resting point and a little chapel there. The signs along the route, the people, the rest people, the parking areas. So what we did is we created this team inviting artists, Ai Weiwei, Kristen Gantenbein from Basel, HHF, Alejandro Aravena from Chile, and a set of different Mexican architects to develop different things along the route. So we created a master plan defining where to put sanitary services, medical services, trash containers, or places to eat and to rest, etc. So, and then we created and we imagined choose where we could put these points of interest or icons or places of gathering, also a little bit the places of reflection that would be developed by these different architects. No, so the first point and the idea of the government was to create one they literally asked us for a sculpture of gratitude that could mark like the beginning of where people mostly begin the pilgrimage. So what we decided is to create a space, an open chapel, and our principle was to create this chapel in this most simple and most strongest Catholic symbol, which is a cross. This is a Catholic rook. Sorry, I didn't say it before. And so we did this virtual cross with these 4 walls. We simply lifted the walls, of course, also as a homage to Matias Geritz and Barragan, that is this spectacular monument in Mexico City that have these walls, these large walls going on to be very high. But we created this space that could serve as an open chapel that can be seen from many different points, so it can really be a point of distinction within the route. It also marks the beginning, but we also created, for example, the next point, which is on top of the mountains, you can see it there in the middle, is a column created by architects Chris and Gantemann from Basel in Switzerland. And you can see it from here, you can see the next point. So it's also an idea of how your route is going to be along, no? So from the column you can also see the next point, and in some cases you cannot see the next point, but you encounter through the route. It depends what we wanted to create. So this is the next point, the column that I was telling you about. The next one, you encounter it, you don't see it from the different places, which is Reinsch-Pierce is only a wall that exits to the landscape and goes into the mountain, like in a little bit of reflection of your exteriorness as individual and your individualness and interiorness as person, no? The next point, well, there's different points, service areas along the route developed by another designer in Mexico. There are different shelters designed by another architect in Mexico that we strategically placed them along the little towns as they could serve for different functions when the pilgrimage is not going on. So it's also, again, a building that it can serve for a different different program that it was asked for. For example, this one is working as a political reunion center for the town and the towns around. But it's also one of the shelters, no? So it's a simple building with lots of illumination and ventilation that is used for a shelter in this period. The next point you encounter is this chapel that we did with the 2 walls that just fold into each other and that create this inner space, spiritual inner space. Another point you encounter this observation point. I'm going to go fast through it and then we can open for questions. This one is done by Alejandra Aravena. This is the highest point on the route, that all of a sudden you enter into the structure that could be in a very urban situation, but it's totally out of nowhere. And the last point you encounter before you enter the town of where the Virgin is this one, which is done by Derek Delek and Rosana Montiel. And what they did is they just encircled the landscape to create a point of stop, reflection, or whatever. So with this, I'm going to open up for questions if there are. I'm sorry if it took a little bit longer than it should have, but I'm happy to hear you all. Thank you very much.
I appreciate very much your discussion about accommodating the handicraft that you find available and a kind of an improvisational a sort of attitude about what might emerge from the process. In some of the images, though, I sort of see some hints of some very refined interior linings of some of that more rough kind of armature. And I'm just curious if you could sort of say a word about the way you began to create these kinds of high-touch kinds of surfaces and so on relative to that rougher armature.
For example, in the funeral house, for us was very important that you could have this space really defined and this place where you can play a lot with the transitional way of using the light and creating these spaces. But we also needed a very refined space for where the mooring ritual is happening. So this is where we try to put all our efforts in the budget and in the situation to try to do this very refined, which are not, probably they look in the photograph, but they're not totally like that. Interiors, no? For example, we use cast, but it's natural cast without any paint or anything. So it looks a little bit rough, no? So it doesn't have paint and it doesn't fall because the paint then they don't repaint it, etc. No, so it's natural and that, but it's more refined than the rough exterior because we definitely needed to create this space more as a fine-tuned space for this ritual. No, more to be more cozy, more specific for it.
And just to say a word then about what, in that case, in terms of finding the individuals, the craftspeople who would be able to achieve those more highly refined surfaces, are those someone that you bring specifically to the project to do that, or is that another group within the larger worker force that you're able to get very specifically to communicate with about what your desired effect is?
In this case, in the funeral house, was the same persons, and we developed with them these details. No, in other cases, for example, in the botanical garden, which there we didn't want it to create this very nice detail. As I tell you, we only wanted to create these shells, very rough. But the client wanted that this roughness was done to precision. So we even hired, like, there were different people doing the steel, different people doing the wood, different people doing the concrete, specialized people that we found around the country, because they were not in Culiacan, they were from different places of the country. So it depends on the project and it depends on the client. No, so but mostly what I'm telling you is, like, we try to define the space with the definition of the space. If we want to create a more intimate space that is more calm and refined, then we try to use the materials the rough materials we can use to do that, or we create the strategies to do that, but within the space. No, not the perfect definition of this cast, yeast perfectly put, etc. No.
So in the United States, a lot of our projects are obviously built by professional builders, and with professionalism comes a certain kind of detachment. And I'm wondering if, when you're working with these amateur local builders, you see them relate to the project in a different way.
Yeah, that's something we have, that we are very lucky that it's strange because we create really a truly set of plans this thick, and they don't see it. They just probably see the first front page. They stack it in the back and they start building it, and then we go to the construction site and we develop that. Whereas, for example, we're doing a project in France now, and it's totally different. No, there we have to really do the stack of plans, and they're going to look through it, and they're not going to have a relation with us at all. So it's a totally different condition, definitely, which is kind of problematic at some points, because you arrive and there's not a door where it should be, and you said, there should be a door here. Oh no, you never said that. Come on, it's in the plans, no? Of course, it's in the plans, and then it's a problem, you know? But especially because nobody but the client pays for it, because it's nobody's legal responsibility at the end, no? But that allows us to other things. Whereas in France, that is a restriction, but also it's a freedom, because then you know that you are in control perfectly, truly, from the beginning to the end. So everything has its advantages and its disadvantages, no? Like everything in life. So it's just the condition that we work. And what we are trying to understand always is trying to understand what is the condition that we work and work with it, no? In France, that's the condition. We need to draw this set of plans, and that's going to be the way it's going to be built, and that's it point. So we are planning for that to happen. And in Mexico, we know that this set of plans are going to be stuck behind, and that we really need to be sitting there the whole time in the construction site to try to control what we can, no? In the moment that we can. Yes?
Your architecture, and Mexican architecture, seems to do such a great job of being critically regional and responding to site conditions and available resources. And I was wondering when you're practicing outside of Mexico, if you feel as if you're able to speak to the site conditions and the limitations as well, not being from that culture and not being as familiar with the landscape, or is that only possible when you're native to the region?
It's a very good question, and that has happened recently, because before we built in China, but in China truly is, probably it sounds like it's the other side of the world, but it's very similar to what happens in Mexico, although we cannot communicate at all with them. But the conditions are very, very similar, so that was not like building in the other side of the world. It was only in the plain distance, but that was the only thing. But for example, now that we're doing a building in France, and we've done several projects before in different parts of the world, but really now we're building it, we encounter like the first time this problem, no? Or not problem, this thing. And first, I thought it was very important that we get involved in the culture. I spent a lot of time there. I spent it before, so I know the country well. But so like for the project, it is a big project. It's 3 buildings in a complex, and we decided like to literally be much more in contact there. We had 2 French architects collaborating already in the office. We found a local architect, etc., just to find out that it didn't matter any local thing, but just the regulations. I mean, in France, the regulations are so crazy that it is defined how the space is designed, literally, especially in the project that we're in, because we're in a project that we have housing, social housing, that it's really restrictive, and the client wants to meet all these certifications that are kind of like LEED certifications, but are French certifications, and so all the rules that we have to follow are defining the design, much more than the local conditions and the society in France and all that we studied there, and that we wanted to really study and achieve. That didn't had an influence on the project, unfortunately. Well, it did. I think at the end it did. But much more the regulations that we had to follow. But well, for that, that was just a parenthesis. But for us to say that we really, I really think that it's very important to understand the conditions of the society, the context, the place, and for that, it's impossible to do it from my mind, from my background. So this is one of the things that I think it's important for collaborations, not only to understand a place like Culiacan, that for me probably is more familiar, but also to understand a place like France, like Lyon in France, no? So I'm not going to be able to understand it even if I live there for 2 or 3 years. It's something that it's cultural, that you're born with, that you live it, no? So this is where I started to collaborate with different people that are from there, and then they can bring into the project that kind of knowledge.
But it seems that like you pay a lot of attention about the people that at the end are going to use your architecture piece. And most of the time we are used to see a project and architects that try to like define up to the end of how the piece are going to be used at the end user. So it's like I wanted to ask you if you think like you're paying lots of attention about the spontaneity of the use, like look at the yoga bed, using your garden design, but like there is a boundary between like where the architect should stop his project and give the project to the final user to be used, to take ownership on the project. There is a boundary and where you place it.
Well, I don't know, but definitely we leave it a little bit loose. That's correct, because I truly believe that the architecture is activated by the user and that it will happen whatever needs to happen with the project with the user, no? But certainly one of the things we really like to do is first we like to know the user, no? And secondly, we like to think of it as I was saying, as a conversation. So we set up the basis of the conversation thinking on the user, thinking who we are dealing with. So we understand the context. We try to understand, because I don't think we can ever understand it completely. We try to understand the persons who are going to use it, and we try to set up the basis of the conversation, like to put the first topic of the conversation with our architecture, and there the conversation can lead us wherever it will lead. We don't know, no? And this is how architecture will develop over time. Where to place the limit, we don't control it. We probably I don't even think on where to put the limit, no? We just develop it through the process. And yeah, there's some points that we allow the process to be very permeable with the user in terms of designing it even with the user, no? So deciding how to set up the conversation even with the user in the beginning. So sometimes it's that, sometimes we don't have this kind of conversation with the user. For example, in the botanical garden, we were able to work with some of them, but more like interviews, etc., not to really work the lines with them, no? As for example, in the house of Ajijic, we truly designed the house with the lady, the client. She was involved even in the selection process of the material. So it depends. It's a very hard question. It's a very good question. I don't know where to set the limit, but definitely we leave it a little bit loose in all the projects.
Can you tell me what inspired your formal languages? The reason I'm asking about it is your formal language is quite unique, but at the same time, it's still very abstract, and the material you use can explain the formal language. And partly the reason I ask is I'm not so familiar to your local architecture. Is there any inspiration for your building design?
Well, it's very different things. It's a good question. We always focus on very different things. I think this is why all the projects, the results are very different. The principle is trying to focus on one basic thing. For example, as I was telling in the Ajijic house, in the house of the compacted earth, our main thing we had since I met the client was how are we going to meet the budget and do a nice house to meet the budget. So the main preoccupation was that. So that was the inspiration for that house. The inspiration was how to meet the budget. For example, in the botanical garden was how to integrate the nature with the new buildings and the existing with the new program, the botanic with the art. So it depends on a very probably simple thing as in the funeral, how to bring the garden into the ritual, or a very profound thing or a very important thing like the budget in the house, no? So it comes from different places always, and that lead us to different results, as you could see, no? And the techniques we use or the strategies, I would like to use the word strategy better than technique. the strategies we use to develop, probably they're what I've been describing through the lecture, no? Like the use of the directness of the material, the idea of pushing the project to be something else, the idea of using the geometry and the possibilities of its complexities within this geometry, this defined geometry. So these things, then they are strategies, no? But the inspiration comes from very different points. That sometimes is like in the office stacking building, is the inspiration was with these office guys sitting in a desk and explaining me their idea, no?
Then would you consider your buildings as your forever architecture?
As what?
Forever architecture?
No, I don't like these titles. I'm not sure
Yeah, I know.
about.
I don't mean in the context of 60s and 70s, but when I listened to your presentation, I heard a lot of things about local economy and local materials and the local conditions. So I was wondering if what kind of position do you want to put your designs?
I would probably say that's responsibility. I think that I think for me it's a responsibility to understand these conditions to do the architecture. But I would not put a label to it. I would just say for me it's doing architecture, but that's the way I like to do it, or I think it should be. Do it for me, for my own standards.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.
Besides concrete and compacted earth, what other local resources have you thought of using?
That's a good question because I only show those projects, right? We've used concrete bricks, for example. Bricks is an important industry in Mexico. Ceramic, we've used ceramic as well. We're right now building a house just in ceramic walls. And in the botanical garden, the next buildings are concrete bricks. We're trying to explore on different materials, but they are all very simple and just there are 5 or 6 materials. There's not any really, like, because as I was telling you, steel is out of the question. It's really expensive. Sometimes depends on the place. For example, Mexico City, in terms of if you want to do, in terms of the cost of the land and the cost of the constructions, because it's an earthquake area, you need to use steel. So at the end that compensates, no? But it depends where. Or for example, Culiacan, if you want to do a high building and you want to do it within a budget, you need to use steel. But then steel is very expensive still, no? Depends on what side of the balance you put it. Wood is no question. There's no wood that it's good for construction in Mexico. We don't have the cultivated wood and with the treated wood, but also the wood that grows in Mexico because of the weather. I think it's because of the weather. It's not good. So yeah, they leave us with very little materials, no?
Do they use wood for scaffolding?
Yes, they use wood for scaffolding. That's one of the things also that I didn't mention, but the scaffolding is not perfect. It's not, I mean, it's very rough wood and it's not very high quality wood. So then the result obviously is also because of that, no? So that comes also from there.
Getting a little late, probably. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.